evening and welcome from that corner in the Northeast, land of colonialism and reverence. This is Dark Hour Paranormal. Folks, I am your host tonight, Mike, and I want to thank you for joining us again once more for an earlier broadcast. I happen to enjoy this time slot right before Goof On, and I don't have to deal with some of the nonsense that the internet provides us a little bit later on into the evening. So, with that in mind, we might continue to do some of these earlier shows. I mean, it's going to be 6 o'clock Eastern or 11 o'clock Eastern at any given time. Moving forward, if something changes, you will all be the first to know. So tonight, we're going to be exploring, I think, a very interesting subject and something that is, once again, very intangible. And even when it comes to evidence, it's really tough because there's a lot of anecdotal evidence for some of the things that we're going to be speaking on. Now, curiously enough, we have some of the phenomenon that we will discuss tonight right here in our backyard in Massachusetts. And I suspect that you can find pockets of what we're going to be getting into all across the world, but they may or may not be as defined as one would believe to see. Tonight, folks, we're going to be talking about time portals and time pockets, specifically within our experience in the Bridgewater Triangle area. Now, for those who are Bridgewater Triangle, this is a particular area that has been designated by Lauren Cohen. Cohen? I say that right? And Harry will correct me if I'm incorrect on that. But Lauren, back in, I think it was the early 80s, had put out a book, and he had defined certain areas based on people's reports and experiences that were said to have happened within this triangular block in Massachusetts. Now, this is not anomalous in the sense that we have other triangles like this all throughout the world. The Bermuda Triangle, the Devil's Triangle, just to name a couple. The Bennington Triangle right up in, I think it's Vermont, New Hampshire area. For whatever reason, this geometry is pervasive across our field. But tonight, we're going to be focusing on one specific aspect, once again, when it comes to dealing with some of these anomalous areas as they are, the Bridgewater Triangle tonight being at the forefront. And here with me to discuss this at length is one of the most prominent researchers, and yes, I might even go as far as to call him an expert because of his historical knowledge and experiential field work, we can say. I have Harry Green from the Bridgewater Triangle Paranormal Investigators. Fantastic outfit, folks. Go and check out their channel. You'll see all manner of different investigations, and Harry lends at different times different insights to what they're getting into, especially when it comes to the backstories and the histories, getting them right, making sure they're accurate. And if they're not, correcting not only what he's found for research, but others who are, working on this as well. And that's sort of what we need to be doing in a lot of ways, sort of cross-checking, but lovingly, gently, right? It's all about making sure that we're reporting the most accurate story in respect to whatever it is that we're researching. So again, tonight I have Harry with us. He put out a fantastic documentary on the Bridgewater Triangle. So when you're done watching mine, which seems like a commercial in comparison to the work that Harry put into his, go to the Bridgewater Triangle Paranormal Investigators here on YouTube and watch that amazing documentary. Now, I do have a little treat for you folks tonight, and those of you who are privy to stick around about halfway through the show, depending on how the pacing goes, will be enlightened to this particular little treasure that has sort of fallen into my lap, and I cannot wait to show you and discuss this with someone who is as prominent in the field of paranormal investigation as Harry Green is. So, without further ado, as we say on YouTube, right? That's what they say. Man, we'll lose that tagline eventually, but for now, it works. I'd like to introduce to you or have you revisit my good friend, Harry Green from the Bridgewater Triangle Paranormal Investigators. Harry, how you doing tonight, man? Thanks for joining us once again.
Good. Very cold outside, but I'm managing.
Are you in the midst of this storm as well? Is it hitting you, or are you getting most of the rain? Because a lot of this out right now, folks, we're having somewhat of a big snowstorm for today. Harry, how's it affecting you, brother?
Right now it's snowing like crazy. I just had probably about maybe 3 inches out there.
3 inches. Yeah, that's about. I mean, I think we're just up to about 4 at the moment, but We are in the Northeast, and as we go through our topics tonight, we'll do our best not to bury ourselves too far into that accumulation. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this subject. What would you say to somebody who asked you what time portals or time pockets in the Bridgewater Triangle are all about? How would you approach this to someone who's perhaps not very familiar with our field at large, but is still very interested in understanding something about this subject?
Well, I believe that the portals, these time pockets, these vortexes, I should say, and the triangle are probably different from these other vortexes found around the world. I believe that this vortex was created due to all the negative energy that got imbued into the land from King Philip's War, with between the early soldiers and the natives. So this particular time pocket is based on different time pockets around the world. This time pocket, I believe, is a vortex coming from the Hockamock, which means place where spirits dwell. It's a opening probably to another realm, maybe a spiritual realm, because the natives were very spiritual.
You mentioned that the land itself, because of what has happened within this vicinity, might actually play a part in this. And I think you and I have talked a little bit about perhaps the degradation of a vortex or a portal. And we may have done it publicly. I don't recall exactly, but we've had some very vivid conversations when it comes to that. Do you think that some of these areas of purported activity, when we talk about time portals and so forth, do you think that these were naturally already existing and perhaps utilized at one point? Do you think that there was a possibility that, perhaps Native Americans with certain knowledge were able to create these, or were they just sort of jumping on the back of what was already there prior to all tumult and bloodshed that occurred on that land?
I believe that they created it, since it was their sacred burial ground. I don't believe that it was just something that was there. I believe it was something that they created.
Again, when we talk about some of these experiences that people have, where does the time shift come into this? Quite readily, if somebody was going from one space to another space, or kind of peering in, that the chronovisor works, right, where you can kind of see into another world or another dimension. Even possibly in some circumstances, I've been told you can put objects yourself through this to a certain degree. Where does the time manipulation come from when you talk about those vortexes that we know about in the Bridgewater Triangle?
I believe it's based on all the negative energy. I don't know if it necessarily appears at a certain time. It could have to do with certain moon phases, or even winter time with more static electricity in the air. I believe that it just appears at any given time, no specific time really. I don't think you can just go out there expecting to try to find these vortexes. I know that a lot of people have accidentally stumbled upon them. Just a couple of months ago, I know somebody wrote in the Bridgewater Triangle group page that they were driving on Route 24, and they were going underneath the West Street Bridge, and they usually see their sign for the 106 exit, but the exit was gone, and he found himself 4.5 miles down the road by the 495 exit. Within seconds, he said he could remember that the song that was playing, I didn't even skip a beat. It's as if no time had gone by at all.
Bear with me here. I have a little lag here. I took the camera off for the moment. I'm still listening to everything that you're saying. The individual that you speak about, this is a really interesting story. You conveyed it to me. He gets off an exit, and next thing you know, he's some miles back from where he thought he should be. In fact, when he looks at the clock, there may be some discrepancy there.
And
what is it about? Oh, go ahead.
He wasn't just the only one that experienced this. I know a while back there was a couple that were driving on, I think it was Route 195. They were going home to Providence, and they noticed this black orb in the middle of the road, and he tried to swerve to avoid it, but he ended up driving through it. And there was about four of them in the car. They didn't want to stop. They got scared, so they kept going. And they found themselves now in the opposite direction, driving in Taunton, which is way out of the way.
Very, very curious. I mean, what were some of the initial explanations that these people had conveyed to you as they told you the story? I mean, what was their best guess as to what had happened, maybe even outside of the realm of esoterics, if they didn't immediately just jump into that?
Well, I mean, maybe they were just dazed and confused at what they saw. Maybe they took a wrong turn, but they believe that they stepped through some kind of vortex. I don't really have like all the information on the story. I was collaborating with another YouTuber at the time doing the documentary on that subject.
This reminds me of a good friend of mine, Alex O's story at some point. He had said, he was out in the woods and he was at a friend. Of course, when this happened with more than one person, it's difficult for him not to take a good hard look at it. So his story has a lot of detail in it, and it does involve a Bigfoot and perhaps a family Bigfoot. Long story short, he gets into the woods and he feels himself being whisked off in one way or another. Next thing you know, he opens his eyes and realizes that he's in this iridescent forest. So he described it a lot the way you see some Avatar, the way that the leaves were bigger and actually sort of scintillated. Perhaps from within, they were radiating energy. And to me, that's very indicative of being in a different dimension. I mean, near experiences have often come back and reported, I walked through a garden of flowers and these flowers were very much alive, but the light was coming from within them rather than reflecting off of them. So I thought that was pretty curious. The reason I'm bringing this story right now is because after he was sent back, let's say, by three male, tall Bigfoot, himself along with his friend on the opposite side of a riverbank, and again they were walking in the opposite direction too. So 1 second they're walking in one direction, they have this experience but never seem to skip a beat in how they're walking, yet no explanation how they got onto the other side of the riverbed. Do you find in some Bridgewater Triangle experiences that people relay anything is drastic with respect to that type of movement rather than a few feet off to the right, left? I mean, when you're in a car, you're traveling very quickly, and of course that some miles can be covered, but on foot you hear people talk about this sort of happening in the woods.
Yeah, it seems that the swamp is basically a big magnet pretty much for these vortexes. But I do know that when you think of these vortexes, you think, time holes, wormhole pockets. I do know that in order for time travel to even be possible, there has to be like a bend in the space-time continuum. So in order to travel from point A to point B is a good distance, unless the space-time continuum was to bend somehow and you were able to enter through like a black hole, then you got to come out the other side.
I think there has to be something more observable and perhaps even more. I think in construct, when we talk about some of these vortices or portals, yes, in many cases, we stand at least as a theory that when you bend time and space, sort of make a horseshoe shape from one point to the next, you can sort of fall through if there's a hole. If it, thinking of it in a third dimensional aspect, connecting 2 points in a shorter distance than what you normally travel. Apparently, as we mentioned, this does work for time as well. But again, most of it is theoretical as far as we understand academically. The public knows it. In working with some of these different areas, within the Bridgewater Triangle, let's say, I still think that there's something more inherent within the Earth. So perhaps the Earth has little jump-off points that can be utilized this way. Perhaps not every time you step into one of these, that's how it's going to be enacted. But the architecture is there for somebody who has the knowledge or is there at the right time. Usually the former, when you talk about Native Americans and their understanding about certain things. But again, there has to be a natural explanation. You go out to Arizona, I point that out specifically because Era is supposedly on or over the heart chakra. And yes, I understand that as a living being, the earth does have chakra points, okay, whole system of chakras. And so Arizona sits right on that heart chakra. And this is one of the reasons it's such a spiritual place the way that it is. And there are so many different portals that people talk about, vortexes out there in nature. What are some other stories that kind of fascinated you? What were some of the elements that you pulled out of what people told you type of experience, and had you think to yourself, well, there's got to be something here, even if they don't understand how to express it? There's definitely something here within their experience.
I do have a theory on basically how they're getting these experiences, or basically um, how these vortexes show up. I like you were saying how the Earth basically creates this. They're in key areas of the Earth, but um, for a long time there was a theory that these extraterrestrials, UFOs, they were little green men, basically from a different planet. But there's a new interesting theory that these beings could be us from the future, and which would mean that these UFOs are time machines, let's say, and they might be capable of producing these pockets to make time travel possible. These same pockets that now are lingering behind, that so many people have stepped through and traveled through time.
Mm.
They might not just be necessarily these vortexes found somewhere on key areas of the earth. They might actually be being created by this device, this spacecraft. I know in the first UFO sighting in the United States was 1639 by in John Winthrop. Actually, he was the governor of Massachusetts. He documented this, that three men were rowing a boat in the Charles River, and they saw the strange light in the sky just darting back and forth between Charlestown and them. And within seconds, they said that they found themselves 3.5 miles upstream, and they don't remember rowing against the tide, nothing. It's as if, again, no time has gone by.
There's something to talk about when we speak about that theory about these particular beings who are atmosphere and perhaps visit us, abduct us, to whatever degree interact us from the future. I think it's certainly a possibility. I always wonder if that is our natural course of evolution, or if it's a possibility of that type of evolution, that we will eventually reach that same stage, or that all civilizations go through a similar evolution and eventually reach that stage. Where are all the intermediate time travelers? Where are all the time travelers that led up to that point? And if there aren't any, or they're not allowed to come back and reveal themselves, why can this other particular faction of what is us in the future have the ability to do it, or be okay? I don't think it's violating any universal law to do something like that, but of course you have to be very careful how you if you do come into some sort of agreement in this way. Again, I think it's a fascinating idea, and he seems to want to set a singularity, right? They want to say, oh, it's this, and this is what it always is. It might be a different shade or a different color, but this is what is at the core. I don't necessarily think that may be the case. I think that when you have the understanding how the universe works, when you understand electromagnetics, you understand what gravity actually is, how this works with matter, light, so forth. When you have a grasp on that, again, this opens up the doors for you to sort of experiment, and perhaps you're going to create a vortex over here. You're going to color it a certain way, and it's going to be for one purpose or another. Maybe it'll collapse at a certain point, or it'll be something much more permanent. Regardless, I think these have been created synthetically, at least for those who are traveling now. And of course, we'll talk about UFOs, the way that some of these particular crafts move. I mean, they do it in very square wave type pattern. They have these 90 degrees that go everywhere. In an instant, many times when they start making these 90 degrees, poof, they're gone. And people say, well, that's very curious. What's the correlation? in the sacred geometry and you understand how some of the particular geometry precede the second dimension, the third dimension, and are obviously existing in the fourth, that we can look at some of, right? Even theoretically. We find that in that 9-degree turn, that's actually shifting into another dimension. We're just getting ready, amping up into the frequency, and then poof, you're gone. Have enough energy behind you. So I think that's very, very curious. What kind of science? This might just be in question, in regards to whatever you might have on your head with this. What kind of science do you think we're looking at when we talk about grounded portals here on the planet? Within the Bridgewater Triangle, we'll stay from.
Well, it could just be these natural vortexes that these spacecrafts that maybe they're just able to locate them also in key areas of the Earth. If it's not a vortex created by these spacecrafts, then I believe maybe that these spacecrafts can find these vortexes. Because if you think about it, there was a hype of UFO sightings in the late 1970s, especially here in the Bridgewater Triangle. I think it was a radio host, Steve Sprazier, was driving actually on Route 24 when he saw a large home plate shape in the sky. And actually, Route 24 is where that gentleman was driving, where he ended up 4.5 miles down the road. So these spacecrafts might just be able to locate these pockets in key areas of the Earth. Now, you got to think of this. There hasn't been that many UFO sightings in the Bridgewater Triangle as of lately. It seems that a lot of the paranormal activity has died down. And if you think about it, they're building more homes in the swamp. They're knocking down all the trees in the Hockomock. They're building more houses, more industrial parks. More families are moving in. So it might be creating more positive energy that's overlapping on the negative energy, now kind of closing this vortex. And that's why we're not seeing these UFOs anymore, because they can't find these pockets now that they're slowly starting to close.
There might actually be something to that, the way that you talk about it, the way I'm hearing it. And one of my questions is, when we look at archaeology and we talk about the great unconformity, which is essentially a whole, millions of years of rocks that are and stone sediment that's missing from these archaeological digs. And we can find the great unconformity in even more of a microcosmic sense when we talk about the strata and so forth. What ends up happening with some of these societies that we understand to the degree that we do is that they literally turn to dust. Everything goes out. Everything just turns to those finite molecules, or returns to them, I should say. And somehow that's what happens, and we miss a lot of this information within the idea that this positive energy or this developed energy is coming over. And it may not be positive. It may just be something washing over because of human development taking over, right? You mentioned layering over. Do you think this would be somewhat of a merging of the energies to find an equilibrium at some point? Or do you think that some of these energies that layer over might sandwich themselves? And in one way, shape, or form, if I were to dig, let's say energetically, 100 years from now, I could find some of the evidence of what was, what we've experienced here, paranormal or otherwise, within the Bridgewater Triangle.
Well, when you say sandwich, I know there was a theory that energy never goes away. It always just changes its shape. So yeah, it's possible that it could just be sandwiching over this negative energy. But that doesn't really, it would explain why the vortex seems like it's closing up. Especially if energy doesn't die, it just goes into a different form of matter.
What ends up happening, and it's not something that many people are aware of, but those who are sensitive or have subtly been able to look in the direction of this type of activity, what happens is that everything is cyclical. At least, okay, I'm not going to say everything, but I will say, as much as I can observe, it all looks cyclical, and that deals with times too. So when we go back to Montauk and we talk about the Montauk Project, Duncan Cameron especially had always mentioned we're on these different 20 or 40-year cycles. And one of the reasons they were able to talk at the level they were able to talk without certain reprisal at a certain point is because we were already starting to close the last bit of that loop. And believe it or not, folks, 2023, this year, is the closing of that loop for the Montauk project. It's fun. And one of the reasons I'm going to be visiting that area twice. But again, the reason I'm mentioning this now is because maybe in some way, shape, or form, when we talk about this type of activity, it's still within the same circuit of how the Earth changes. So as the sun dims light setting, okay, we know that the sun's still there. We can still see it, but that the light is much dimmer. Perhaps that's what's happening to some of the more tumultuous energy that this Earth has experienced. And of course, in order for this to happen, there must be some sort of outside healing directed into this particular living body. I would think that would be the logical course to have a result where we actually see some of the healing happening on the planet. If that's the case, eventually it'll be very difficult to pick up on that signature that was there so long ago. And I think in other areas, Harry, we've seen this, especially in Europe, where there has been the sighting of a particular entity in a castle for God knows how long, hundreds of years, and all of a sudden they just disappear. They're gone. Now, either the energy itself moved on, or something, I feel like, completed itself, kind of wrapped itself up, because we're not stagnant. There's nothing stagnant about this reality. In fact, they said it perfectly. The only thing that stays the same is change. Sage Francis even mentioned this some years ago. And if that's the case, eventually some of this stuff that we were researching now, again, the tumultuous shit, is not going to be as perceptible. But it's all about what else we put on top of that sandwich. You know what I mean? We can't put some bad meat on there. We got to put something good on there. And eventually I think it would merge. Have you yourself experienced some of these time pockets out by any of the more well-known locations in the Bridgewater Triangle, such as the Freetown State Forest, Lover's Leap, King Philip's Cave, any of these notable spots? Have you had any of these type of time slip experiences?
Yes. I'm not sure. I can't really explain it. This was back in 2006, and this was before GPSs. I was invited to go to the Charlie Horse, and I was rushing around to get ready. I hop in my car, I go to West Bridgewater, the Charlie Horse, and my license was expired. I forgot to bring my newer one, so they wouldn't let me in. So I got on. Back then, it was the old flip phone, and I got on the phone with a friend, and he said, "Well, we're just going to go to the Westgate Lanes. Why don't you just meet us there?" So I decided to hop on to Route 24. I was going to go north and get off at the Westgate Mall exit. I stupidly went south. And when I realized this, I got off at the first exit in Bridgewater. And again, I was 24 years old back then. I wasn't really driving around on the highway a lot. So I stopped at this gas station, and I asked for directions. And I said, I don't want to take the highway. And he told me to go down Elm Street, which turns into Scotland Street in West Bridgewater. So I proceeded down that route, and I can remember that the street was, a wooded street. There was farmland like on the right, all kinds of a big cornfield, all kinds of woods on the left, maybe 3 or 4 houses on the street. And I can remember driving down this road now back then with no GPS, thinking to myself, this is creepy. I feel like something is watching me, and I can't explain it, and I'm getting creeped out. And I can remember the road kept going and going and going, and I'm thinking to myself, when's this road going to end? Pretty soon I should be in West Bridgewater by 106, Route 24, near that area. And I can remember saying to myself, you know what, I'm just going to pull over, turn around, and just take the highway back. Years later, now going down that same road over by the Skim Milk Bridge where we were shooting the documentary, I noticed now there's a lot of industrial buildings over there. There's some newer houses there, and I remember saying, to a couple of buddies of mine, that the stuff back in 2006 was not here. You know, there was just a couple houses, maybe like 4 houses. So I can remember looking on now the GPS in Google, and a lot of these industrial parks and these buildings and these houses were built in 2002. The majority of them were built in 2005. And I remember saying to myself, that's impossible. I was on that road in 2006. There was like 4 houses on the road. So how were these newer houses there before 2006? It doesn't make any sense. And driving down that road, it's not really that long, but I can remember back then just driving and driving. So something doesn't add up. And I know a lot of the houses, like I said, there was a couple of houses, they looked like they were built in like the 1940s, and which were confirmed on Google. But a lot of these houses were newer, built in 2002, 2004, 2005, but they weren't there in 2006. A lot of the industrial buildings were built in 2005, but when I was on that road, there was nothing there. It was all woods.
Well, this is a hard one to say that it's just false memory, I mean, or something along the lines of the Mandela effect or something like this. There's a world-renowned researcher out there by the name of Elizabeth something or other. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but I'm going to paraphrase what she said. She ascertains that there's no direct way to verify whether a memory is real or false. Now, I think there are a lot of people who would argue that because, there's experiential value behind it. Let's say I broke my arm in the second grade. Well, I still have the scar and I remember that happening. But apparently the mind is so malleable. It's so adaptable that we can create false memories that, even your common person might actually believe after a certain point. You have to have something going on within you out of balance in any way to actually start believing some of this stuff. And I always keep this in mind when I talk to certain people who have had some of the more fantastic experiences. And no, it's not the first thing I jump to, but it's, again, a consideration that I need to keep in mind in a critical sense for that analysis going forward, not only for myself, but for those I'm going to present X, Y, and Z for. But your experience here seems very anomalous, that wherein we can't really track how that happened. I find that absolutely fascinating, Harry. Before we go on, because I'm gonna pull up that little surprise in just a moment, because you do such a fantastic job with this. Can you please once again relay your experience with the Thunderbird that you saw when you were younger, out riding your bikes with a friend or two? Right there in the Bridgewater Triangle. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Just reiterate that. It's such a fantastic experience. I absolutely love it, bro.
This dates back to 1996, and I guess there was a lot of Thunderbird sightings in the mid 90s. Like I said, a lot of these paranormal activities are starting to die down now. But yes, I was 14 years old, and it was me and a buddy of mine that I grew up with in the neighborhood, Troy. We used to ride our bikes around Kennedy School, Brockton High. We used to ride our bikes down the old quad trails behind Brockton High. And they're all overgrown now, but we were riding our bikes, and one day we got off on our bikes, and he looks up in the sky and he runs. He takes off, and I'm thinking, what is he running from? And the wind was picking up, the shrubs were blowing everywhere, the trees were blowing everywhere. And I look up in the sky, and about 3 stories up, there's this massive, giant bird. And each wingspan was probably the size of like an old 1978 Lincoln Town Car. And I can remember this bird flying over me, and I thought to myself, I hope he doesn't think I'm a worm. I hope he doesn't scoop me up and carry me on his way. But I made eye contact with this bird, and as he was flying over me, I had some kind of relief knowing that he's just going to continue on his way. I do remember looking up, and his texture was like old, worn-out suede. He had a lot of debris caught in his feathers, like cobwebs and twigs. And he flew going south towards Route 138, the Hockomock Swamp, West Bridgewater State Forest is in that area. That's another part of the Hockomock. And that was before I've ever even heard of the Bridgewater Triangle. Like I said, I was 14 years old. So, you know, my friend, he came out of hiding and he's like, Harry, did you see the size of that bird? And I'm like, yeah, dude, it was huge. And, you know, as a kid, I thought maybe it was just like a big turkey vulture that I just never seen before. But this bird was massive. And I know a couple people that actually have seen the same bird within the same time frame, believe it or not.
Unbelievable.
So
Absolutely unbelievable. All right, so you have...
That's what really kind of got
me
into the paranormal. And that I was just saying that's what got me into the paranormal, that and just another story that happened years later, too, as well. So I was always into the research of the triangle ever since then. So that's when I started investigating these areas.
All it takes is one experience, folks,
Mm-hmm.
for you to actually start looking at what's in front of you and questioning the very nature of reality that we have around us. I mean, it seems non-moving in so many ways, even though there are many moving parts, but there are subtle parts underneath that. And again, I've had people come to me at one point in their life and say, yeah, I don't believe in any of this stuff. Yeah, I've heard things. I've seen the ghost shows. That's really interesting. But for one reason or another, I cannot believe. And then next thing you know, they get involved with certain things and maybe they come on an investigation, as I used to do some years ago. They have their own experience wherein they may not come out and say, I'm an outright believer, this is exactly what it is, but they'll tell you straight up with the most confused and attempted analytical view of what they experienced and say, listen, I simply can't explain what I saw or what I felt or what I went through or what we saw collectively. And I think that is incredibly powerful because, again, we don't have to tell everybody or show everybody that it's X, Y, and Z. For most of you, I just want you to know that it's out there and that we're working with this every day on different levels. Even if you're not aware of it, you're still working on it. Well, the proof is in the pudding, and time will tell in way of evidence if that's true for you based on your percept, right? That's kind of the place that I go when I tread this line very carefully. All right. Now, just to diverge for a moment, Harry, I want to bring in this little surprise that I had waited to show. Now, Harry has already seen this picture that I'm going to show you. I'm going to immediately tell you what it isn't when I pull this up here. Okay. Because there are going to be some thoughts that go into it. Obviously, I'll explain the situation, how this unfolded, how I procured it. But I want you all to take a picture. The picture's already taken. Take a look at this incredible picture of what appears to be an entity of some sort, human, of course, laying right over or reaching over a child's playpen as they slept. Basically a newborn. I think that the child may be around 1 year old. And pops up in the moment. Give that a minute. This will certainly show you something. Now, here it is. Okay, this is an outside picture of the security cam, which in this particular entity was caught. Okay. Again, here are the reasons. Well, we'll start this way. Here are some reasons this is legit. Okay. The person who owns the security camera, who has the home where this occurred, okay, has never necessarily happened upon something like this before. It's very difficult for somebody to fabricate this particular type of affect on the security camera. She doesn't have any know-how when it comes to Photoshop. She will to put this out and try to hoax or fabricate it in one way, shape, or form. She's your common layman. And the child in the bassinet is, I believe, her niece. Okay. Her sister was in the house at the time. Okay. But not in the room. In fact, nobody was in the room. And I'll tell you that where this figure is standing, there's furniture. So hypothetically, if you were to try to do this, you have to move some things out of the way. On the right side, the camera is lower to the floor. Okay. So it's sort of flush and parallel with the child's playpen here. Okay, so on the right, you see the bed. Okay, that's the adult bed. And again, behind it right there is that figure. Now, a lot of people, I'm going to tell you what it isn't. A lot of people have speculated that this is a drag frame from perhaps, one of the girls going into the bedroom, check on the baby. It's not, because neither of the people that were in the house that night look like that particular entity. And I actually have a picture for comparison that I'll show you in a moment. Also, if you look close enough, and I wonder if I can zoom up on this a little bit. Okay, if you look close enough, it's not too much, but it's there. Right down here, this is where the hands should be, okay? You don't see them, the cuffs end here, and this is very far into the playpen. So it almost looks like the figure is to the left, half in, half out, a little bit closer to the camera. Now, the first thing I asked, because you do see a very discernible face here. Here's the ear, the eyes, the nose, mouth area, okay? Shoulder comes down, back, down to the back end, and so forth, okay? I asked her, does this look like anybody who's passed away recently? Do you recognize figure in any way, shape, or form? And she said, no, not anybody who's passed away, but she does look like a grandmother who's still living. I said, that's very curious, because to me, initially, honestly, I don't know why, it looks like an older woman. Now, the reason this is so significant is because I have been told by more than one medium that we don't necessarily have to be deceased to come in and visit in this way. Sometimes our energy, which is very fractured, okay, we have many different layers to our overall being. Again, this is what I'm told. These fractions can actually come in and have their own awareness, and in one way, shape, or form, maybe check in on the grandchild while the grandmother's sleeping as you come out of your body to dream. Many of us leave the body entirely, not just float that, arm's length above, as people have surmised. So this is a very curious photograph. The person who gave it to me is not somebody that I would have any question on trusting. I've spoken to her personally, and she was just as perplexed as I was. And in fact, before I got this photo, she posted it on social media and had a plethora of people come back trying to help her understand what she saw. So this was something she immediately put out as soon as she had seen it, asking the question, please come forward. And there's nothing to debunk here, okay? Curious thing is, this was given to me or introduced to me by a good friend of mine. His name is Sergi. He has actually had his own experiences involving his younger son, okay, wherein he was taking pictures and he was catching orbs of light and different colors and sort of this mist in the background, sometimes, most of the time I should say, around his son. And 2-3 years ago, when he started experiencing this, he came to me and asked, and he is somebody who is very skeptical, perhaps a non-believer, but is very open-minded, and even more so now. I said it only takes one experience, right, guys? Now, after that experience with his son, he's paying much more attention. So when he brought this to me, he said, I am absolutely to the death curious what we're looking at. Now, before I show, you know what? Let me show this other photo here, okay? And Harry, and then I'll ask you your thoughts on this, mate. Let's pull that off. I should be able to go back and forth, but anyway. And here we go. Now, this one is their attempt at a recreation. So already finding the picture, they went in and said, we got to try to recreate this so we can get the same pose. You're going to see here, if you kind of zoom up, and again, I'm a little limited on what I can show at the moment. I do apologize. This is the child's mother, okay? And she's, again, doing her best to put her arms into the bassinet. Now, the child was over here on the left side, okay? She had to move furniture, as I mentioned, to get over there and kind of squish herself against the wall to reach this bassinet. This, okay, the outline here, if this was a drag frame, you're going to see this hair, okay? You're going to see some of the other features you have here. Eyes are dark. The other person almost looks like they're wearing sunglasses in a sense, but the shape of the body, even up at the top here, in the shoulder area, is much different than what we just saw a moment ago. And let me just bring that back up, and we'll have you talk about your thoughts on this here. Where are you? There you are. Boom. All right, Harry, what do you think about this?
Well, I'm the type that's skeptic, so immediately my mind goes to the theory that it could be. To me, it doesn't look like an older woman or grandmother. I actually thought it looked like a child myself. So automatically, I would think that maybe it was like a drag time double exposure. But the way it's positioned, like its hand is leaning on something, but it's in midair. So I was thinking maybe,
right,
is it something in a residual sense? Because it's wearing clothing. And I know when you die, your clothing doesn't die with you. So it would have to be something residual. But, you know, it's interesting how you were saying that you don't necessarily have to pass away in order for you to be in another place. So to me, it's either something residual or maybe it's an outer body experience. Because again, it looks like a child. So is it the child itself having an outer body experience, and that's what we're seeing there, or is it something in a residual sense? But those are my two theories on it.
I think that, I mean, there was the idea that perhaps this was some sort of exposure where the child was crawling at one point and now it was up in the top right hand side. But the problem is if you're to look at the length of the arm, this one's up a little bit closer. The original is up a little bit closer to the playpen than in the other picture there. And again, she'd kind of have to be floating a little bit, given the stature, but the dimensions of the extremities to me sort of match up to an adult, perhaps a smaller adult. But you brought up a good point here, and that is that where the hands are, it does appear that she's leaning on something. Now, when I initially saw this, I thought, for sure, that, this entity was leaning on both sides of the playpen. But again, as you see, the arms go right through. And apparently you're leaning on something else here. It's hard to tell, but I almost feel like if you were to get a little closer, you could see some sort of outline of where the hand is pressed down. It's curious, man. It's so curious. And the fact that it came from such a pure source, I'm just going to bring up that other picture once more. It came from such a pure source really makes me turn my head, because if this wasn't fabricated, folks, which I am very much in the belief that this is the real McCoy, then that is exactly what we have. A smoking gun piece of paranormal evidence that, as best we can, corroborates with what we understand a certain photo like this should look like. So it's very curious. If you guys have any ideas or thoughts of your own, I welcome you to drop those in the comments below. Please, I certainly read every single comment that's left on these channel, on these shows. And I would love to hear what you guys think. And if you have any ideas in respect to what I can ask the person who had this photograph, please, I'd love to relay to her, and I'm sure she would be much tickled to be indulged in that way. But, again, you talk about these bits of paranormal activity, and perhaps in this case, we have something legit, but again, would we know it if it smacked us in the face? We're so saturated. I don't even want to say the word jaded, because there's an element of that there too, but we're so saturated with, people in this field. I mean, I can't tell you that I haven't become disenchanted just a little bit, Harry, when it came to talking to some of these paranormal teams. And it's not anybody that I've had on the show. It's just the field as a whole. There are teams out there that have evidence that, my God, if we were to get 9 or 10 of them together and just give the best evidence, we could package that up and say, here's some of the best evidence that anybody has in respect to paranormal activity. Would anybody really pay attention? What do you think, bro? Would it be received that way?
Yeah, I think they would.
I mean, I hope right. I like to be optimistic too. And I still think that the answer is out there. And for the right group of people, this is revelatory. Okay.
I mean,
but when we talk,
Everyone's gonna have their own opinion, but we're all supposed to be one big paranormal family.
That's the idea. I mean, I
Mhm.
look at the same thing with ufology.
Yeah.
But again, we have the same exact problem because of the nature of the evidence captured. Unless you can bring me, a ring that the ghost was wearing, and this thing disappears and appears while I put it on my finger or whatever, and unless you bring me a scrap from a downed alien craft and you say, look, this is what it does, and it dances on its own, whatever, it's very hard for people to accept anything. And even then, there's still going to be people who say, no, this isn't real. It's all CGI. It's all CGI, because that's what people gravitate towards today. And if you actually pay attention, folks out there who hold that as your highest flaming torch, if you pay attention and look into understanding how CGI is actually created, and you look at the layers and the frames and so forth, you might have a little more education before just jumping to CGI. But again, it's all about knowing what you're looking at.
Mhm.
So,
and I know a lot of times, like us, when we were out there trying to bust a lot of myths, we have to go by what others have experienced, whatever people have stated, what they've saw, these pictures.
oh yes. I mean, the most compelling to me are actually the photographs. I love seeing the video footage. I think that's great and all, but a lot of times it's incredibly fleeting. Whereas a photograph, I can measure up anything relative within that photograph to the image that we're seeing, just like we were doing here. So you look at the size of the playpen, you know what the dimensions of those are, and then you take the size of the arm where this thing approximately was standing over the bassinet. You can get a good idea of how long the arm actually was, given the reference of other objects in the room.
When you zoom in, though, doesn't it look like it's wearing child clothing? It almost looks like the print is like child clothing almost. I mean, that's
it's
just
curious.
what I thought.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's curious, and it's anyone's guess, to be honest with you. I couldn't tell you were right or wrong, but when I look at it, it almost reminds me, personally, of someone wearing a sweatshirt, white sweatshirt, sort of bunching up at the back there. Very quickly, guys, I'm just going to bring up that picture once again as we're talking about it for the moment here. But this is the anomalous ghost over the playpen photograph. Okay. Yeah, I mean, just like the way this kind of bunches up. I mean, it's a little unclear, because one of the curious things to me is that obviously a spirit doesn't cast a shadow, right? But when we take photographs, whatever's happening with the light in whatever frequency is popping in, we're certainly seeing some sort of definition within the object or the being that's in front of us. So I don't know. I don't understand that part.
And there's no baby in the playpen, right?
There
At
is.
that time, there is.
Yes. Yep. He's down. He or she. I don't know what it is. He or she is down here on the left. Right about here. This is where the head is, and they're sleeping quite soundly. Almost looks like there are sunglasses here, but I can't tell if this is just a streak that goes back or why this dark spot is here. Again, what's up the shadowing? Now, I looked very quickly here. There obviously is a projector, either inside of the crib or around this area. I'd say it's inside of the crib, because you can see this light coming up. This is not an artifact, all right? And this right here is the light that's reflecting on the thing. You get the stars up here, okay? When you go back to the picture that, no, actually, I'll just show it here. This, obviously, you can see right through this image, except for the head, okay? You can see the star. There's this one stem that comes all the way up here, going to this star, and this one back here. You can see this go through the image. And again, that's curious. If it was frame drag, why wouldn't we have seen something in the way that thing turns, right? I'm just show that last one again.
Unless it's light reflecting, maybe. I don't know. Can there be a frame drag, though, in a motion picture, or is that just in an actual picture, still picture?
It's not a video, so I mean, these are successive shots being taken. Mm-hmm. So if there's a timing between them, and possibly we've seen the malfunction of certain things like that before, where the light does hit just right and it's retained for one reason or another. But again, it's not. It doesn't look like anybody who was in the house at all. And again, just to kind of show this one up very quickly, the projector is still on, and you see the light coming out from behind this woman here, okay? But you don't see it translucently run right through her.
Right.
So This is a good one, man. This is a good one. Thank you, Lexi, for sharing this. Absolutely incredible. And it's not like she's ever gotten anything like this before, as far as I understand. And who knows? Maybe she'll never get like something like this again. But again, this might be smoking gun evidence. How do we know? How do we know? But it's there in front of us. So, unfortunately, we are just about the end of the show. But Harry, I did plug that Bridgewater Triangle documentary on the Bridgewater Triangle, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. Where else can you find your work? Are you just on YouTube? What have you got coming up next in the future here we should be keeping an eye out for?
Right now, we are just on YouTube. We are planning on going to, I reached out to somebody, the Pirate Caves in Lynn, and we definitely want to take a road trip up to Hull, because Hull has their own ghost story of a phantom horse and buggy. And I know it sounds a little silly, but I guess there was a captain in the early 1900s that seen this figure, and it was strolling down the street, and it took off. And when it took off, it was hovering over the ocean. And I guess some people have witnessed seeing this, and it actually forces drivers off the road. So that's something we definitely want to check out. We're planning on taking a trip up there and driving around at midnight with the camera in the car, and to see if we can see this.
Fantastic, man. I wish you the best of luck, because the field work is probably the most difficult. A lot of people, what I'm going to say is something that most people will realize, but a lot of people think that, we go into the field and it's all action. Nah, a lot of times it's sitting around waiting. You got to be patient, whether you're looking for UFOs, whether you're looking for cryptids, whether you're looking for spirits, ghosts, whatever. You have to be very patient. And if you're lucky, you actually capture something. So that's fantastic, bro.
Also, in planning, I want to do this. Rent out the Lizzie Borden house, definitely. But we unfortunately do those kind of things. It's a private investigation. You need a lot of people to chip in. Because I know when we were out there with another group, we used to chip in money to go these private investigations.
I have to tell you, that pisses me off. And we had an issue out here with, I think it's the Gardner House. I think it is up here. One of the most haunted locations. What is it? SK Pierce Mansion. Thank you. Yeah. I'm thinking of the other one there. Yeah, it's the SK Pierce Mansion. Now, this has fallen under new ownership as of some time. And they want you to have a specified amount of people. You got to have like 10 people with you.
Yeah.
I can't just come in with the, whatever, $800 that they ask for. I got to have the 9 other people with me. I never understood why that is. So I hate to hear that there are other locations that are implementing that sort of law.
It's everywhere.
Kind of limiting the research. Yeah, that's unfortunate, man. It really is. And I've even heard worse stories than that. And I think you could probably relay a few in respect to what people have charged others to do. Even insofar as, people saying, well, I own this land. If you want to go hunt on this, so you got to pay me X amount of money. And then come to find out, when the cops show up, you're not supposed to be here. They're like, oh, he doesn't own land. Who? He's gone.
I know.
So
when going to Pennhurst, it's $100 a person. You can just go, you can bring other people with you. But the $100 gets you a public tour, which means you have to stay within a group of 25 people. So you can't really do your own investigation. You'll see our Pennhurst video. We got extremely lucky that day. The tour guide, she worked 2 jobs. So she said, you know what? You guys get the professional camera equipment. You guys can go off on your own. We got real lucky. In order to do a private investigation there, though, at Pennhurst, $1,200.
Whew. That's a steep price to see a few ghosts.
Yeah.
My God. And I know that it's not about collecting rent here. Jesus Christ. I mean, listen, I do understand that some of these older buildings, they do need to have some sort of funding to upkeep them. But, I think there are certain cases that's applicable, and others, well, there's avarice at the helm when they come up with those arbitrary numbers, as it seems. So, listen, buddy, I really appreciate you coming on to the show tonight and having these discussions. Always an honor to have here, and certainly can't wait to work with you out in the field once again. I'm looking towards the warmer weather. Maybe I can make it back out there, and we can hit some of those spots that I wasn't able to see, and you have the extensive wisdom and knowledge about down in the Bridgewater Triangle.
Yep. Well, thank you. Yep.
Cheerio, brother. I'm going to take you off for a moment. You know what to do. Stick around for the moment if you can. Otherwise, I'll talk to you in a bit. All right. Thank you very much. Harry Green of the Bridgewater Triangle Paranormal Investigators. Man, I love these conversations. You know, there's a lot in here that, you know, even myself, I'll go back and I'll listen to it again. I'll catch something in between the lines. It's not something I haven't said before, but it's still something that I'm in awe of, because as much as I'm a part of this, obviously being the host and creator of this channel, I still am the student. I know it's a little cheesy, but it's humbling to keep that in your mind. I mean, why else start doing this if you can't, you know, bring this information to other people in some sort of educational sense, and, you know, yourself learn a little bit along the way. We're obviously stackers of experience. You know, everything is layered within us, and it's just incredible where we travel when we have these type of conversations, and how some of the roads lead right back to each other. That is fascinating. Listen, Bob Gray, what's up, brother? Been a while since I've seen you. Thank you so much for the $2 super sticker supporting Dark Hour Paranormal here. Appreciate it. It's good because unfortunately I'm gonna have to buy a new microphone. I'm using an SM57 right now, which not necessarily for the application, but my microphone, my condenser mic of 25 years, bit the dust during the last show. So that $2 will be going towards a new microphone. Hey, I thank you so much for that. Appreciate you here. Of course, your support is always welcome. Aaron Morrison. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. I haven't seen you in the show for quite some time. And thank you for coming by and checking out what we're doing here. Aaron is also part of the DHP moderation team, and of course is regarded as such. Thank you so much for your $3 super sticker. Very much appreciate your support now and in the past of Dark Hour Paranormal. Guys, you are absolutely incredible. I love hanging out with you every chance I get. And we're going to have another show next week. If I don't do something sooner, the weather is really tough out here right now. We are having a snowstorm tonight. I get one day of reprieve. And then Wednesday, we get another snowstorm. So we'll see if location is something that we're going to be able to do. The weather was a little milder last week. I was hoping to get out, but just did not have the opportunity. When the sun sets so early, kind of limited to what you can do. And it's cold out there, right? Flashlight only does so much when you walk around in the woods in the winter looking for a specific grave. Wow, guys, Long Island Bigfoot, my man. Go and check out Long Island Bigfoot on YouTube, guys. He has some of the most incredible evidence when it comes to Bigfoot and other cryptids roaming around the forests of Long Island, New York. Yes, Bigfoot in Long Island. And damn, he does a fantastic job out there. Long Island Bigfoot, thank you so much for your unbridled support throughout the years, my man, and your $1.99 super sticker. The kick-ass Sasquatch right there. I appreciate that, man. Moonlight, what's up, bro? Thank you so much for your $4 super sticker. I appreciate the support that you've given, even in way of your presence over the years here. And yeah, I'm saying years. We're coming upon 3 years in May. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? Hey, get a chance, go back and watch the first show. We talk about everything. It was really me and 3 other people in the chat for my first show. Yeah, go back and check it out. It's a good time. All right, guys. Listen, I'm going to let you go for the evening. Thank you once again, moderators. I appreciate your help. Thank you so much for being part of this team. Go watch Goof On, guys. Goof On is on now. Probably started 2 minutes ago. Probably catch the intro and his introduction. The intro, music intro, and then his introduction if you head out now. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you being here. Until next time, stay vigilant, continue to research, and we'll all traverse this nebulous field together in search of the truth. Maybe one day we'll have a consensus. Ciao.